Welcome to our audience this afternoon with BLiNQ Networks. This conversation is part of a Hiley report on small cell backhaul that gives an update on the small cell backhaul solutions available today and on the evolution of mobile operators' requirements for small cell backhaul. My name's Hiley, and I'm here today on behalf of Hiley, and I'm talking to Mickey Miller, President, Founder, and CEO of BLiNQ Networks, a company that's pioneering backhaul self-organizing network solutions that offer another approach on how mobile operators might want to deliver mobile broadband services to urban areas. With that, I'd like to introduce Mickey. Perhaps you could give us a high-level introduction to your company and what your product does.
Thanks, Lance. It's great to be here. BLiNQ Networks was formed on assets after acquiring assets from Nortel Networks. Nortel had looked at this problem in the 2007, 8, 9 timeframe, recognized that the biggest issues around scalability to small cell networks will be backhaul. They looked at all the various technologies they had, and they concluded on some of the innovations that we acquired and have built upon that time. Our sole focus is solving the small cell backhaul problem. The name of our company, BLiNQ, stands for Backhaul Linked with Intelligence, IQ, and it's completely focused on enabling carriers to deploy dense, scalable, small cell backhaul networks at half the cost and at half the time of traditional backhaul methods, while providing very cost-effective scalability for future growth. So when we first started talking with carriers prior to forming the company, the things we worked with, and we worked with a lot of carriers that are very forward-looking in how they approach the small cell problem. It was clear that they wanted to have a solution that was true NLOS, so you didn't have multiple hops, but had the reliability that the carriers expect, as well as the predictability. When they deploy a link, they want to guarantee that they'll have that type of throughput and that type of latency consistent for the life of the link. They wanted to make it simple to plan, because the traditional techs that we're used to deploying macros, given the volume of the amount of access points that will be deployed, we're talking about, for instance, college kids that in less than 30 minutes need to be able to deploy an access point and a backhaul point, because many of the times these are being deployed in high footfall areas like Times Square. So you cannot have the time to shut down or make major traffic changes. It's got to be scalable. You know, when we look at Qualcomm's 1,000 times challenge, we're looking at 1,000 times the amount of access points that we have today. We need a backhaul solution that's able to scale with that in a very cost-effective manner. It's, of course, got to have the capacities for multi-mode of 4G, 3G, and Wi-Fi. So it's got to have very high capacity. And all of this has to be delivered for a very low total cost of ownership. And that's where we've been focused, Lance. We've had an intense focus at it. We've developed a great deal of IP around this and introduced our first device. But as we see it, it's a solution. It's not just a simple radio, but it's a complete solution that solves the small cell backhaul problem.
Well, I heard you talking about deployment of networks in dense urban areas, and clearly that's a main focal point for small cell networks. You know, trying to get more capacity into mobile broadband networks that are deployed in hotspot areas, dense urban environments. But can BLiNQ help with the not spots as well? You know, the rural networks and the suburban edge networks that operators are looking at using small cells to solve problems in as well.
Absolutely. The not spot is a typical use case. We see it in 3G, and we see those applications. So our solution works in dense urban, suburban, and even rural. And we see carriers want to address both the hot spots where there's overcapacity as well as the not spots where they can't get capacity.
Well, that's good, and I think I heard you also talking about it being an RF solution, and I guess if it is RF, what bands are you using for this? For your product, what's the spectrum availability like, and what does it typically cost?
Yeah, I think we have a very spectrally agile solution. It's agile and efficient, and agility is key because depending on where you are in the world, the availability of certain bands isn't consistent. So the areas that we focus on the license side, because we have both a licensed and an unlicensed, a dual band solution, where we can basically have both licensed and unlicensed bands. But on the license side, Sub 6 gig, we focus on 2.3, 2.6, 3.5, 3.65. On the unlicensed, of course, 5.8. But what we do as a system, we look to manage the traffic and pair the radio resource or the type of traffic with the best available resource. So certainly guaranteed bit rate, we put over license. Best efforts could go over unlicensed. But it's all about identifying the best radio resource and managing most effectively the radio resources to be able to provide the end user experience that customers demand.
I think it's fair to say, though, that BiNQ is not the only non-line of sight wireless backhaul proposition in the marketplace right now. What would you say would be the one or two key features that you have or advantages that you have that really distinguish your product from the others, to a mobile operator trying to make a decision right now?
I think I look at that question in 2 points. So there's the traditional non-line of sight folks that have been deploying non-line of sight point-to-multipoint or point-to-point links for some time. When I view those, that's a radio. That's a radio solution. Doesn't necessarily lend itself for a self-organizing network that's required in small cells to be able to scale to the level that these carriers want to scale to. Then we have the new entrants like BiNQ, which entered the market a year and a half after we entered the market. We haven't seen their products yet, so I can't comment on what they do differently. But it's critical that people recognize that a small cell backhaul solution, the product has to be designed, developed with that in mind. The traditional ways of doing things just don't scale in the small cell network world.
That's interesting because I think one of the other competitive advantages that's been mentioned by BiNQ in the past is the ability to integrate your solution perhaps into the small cell itself, and this has got to be of interest because the operators are saying that they're really restricted as to how much equipment they could put up on different pieces of street furniture and other targets that they're thinking of using for the deployment of small cells. Is that still a strategy or tactics that you're following?
Absolutely, absolutely. We look at it this way. We're a software company. We deliver on a hardware platform, and that hardware platform can be by itself. It can be integrated in a mechanical package. It can be integrated at the baseband level. There's a wide variety of different ways that it can be integrated. And we think that full integration will take some time, just because today there's massive challenges around just multi-mode, multi-bands of what the current access points have, not to mention what the backhaul spectrum will be. But once those things are further defined, I think there's a great opportunity to integrate into one single package. But again, for us, it's an element. It's an element that's being managed by the overall backhaul self-organizing network, and that's where we focus our efforts. So whether that element is our product, it could be a competitor's product, it could be an integrated access point, backhaul point. It's all about an element in the network that's being managed by the overall SOM.
I mean, another hot topic of discussion, and certainly for outdoor deployed small cells, is the topic of interference, and I believe BiNQ has something special in that area as well.
Absolutely. What we term our managed adaptive resource allocation. Essentially, what we do is we can continuously manage and characterize the RF network, and based on that, we can understand what the foreign interferers are in unlicensed bands, and we can also understand what the interferers are from our own network, and we're able to manage those. Time, space, and frequency are all elements in which we can manage those. And so by doing that, we can both optimize the link at a link level and also at a network level, and the idea is to provide optimal throughput at a network level. And so things like power management, so the best way to think of it is that many things that have been used in the access worlds for some time, we have taken those and optimized those around backhaul, which is a very different problem. but things like power management. So if you don't have traffic, you can power down. So, those are all the things that are baked into our solution, and we have innovations both in the hardware side and the software side to be able to provide a very optimal format.
That's really interesting. We'll come back to some of the cost ramifications that you just mentioned in a moment. But before I leave the area of hardware, what typically are your installation parameters, and how long does it take to install the product that you've visualized and you're bringing to market right now?
Less than 20 minutes, and that's a requirement. We expect to improve on that. Because again, the goal for carriers is less than 30 minutes for the access point and the backhaul point. And less than 20 minutes is what we've been doing in many of the deployments that we've seen so far.
Okay, so and I guess if you're installing in less than 20 minutes, then there can't be too long of a configuration time associated with that. So that's literally you stick it up on a piece of street furniture, for example, or on the side of a building, and you switch it on, and there's not much more involved to it than that, or is there a lot going on in the background?
No, it's all baked into the software. So we have self-defined radios that allow you, depending on what bands you want to operate on, what channels you want to operate on, that configure it. It recognizes where it is and what hub to home to, and you're up and running, plug and play.
So clearly the installation is not going to be a major, or it's going to be one of the main contributors to an improved cost model that your solution might offer to an operator. What are some of the other benefits that you've, as you put it, baked into your solution that reduces the cost of deploying a network using a BiNQ network solution?
Well, first is easy to plan, and secondly, as we talked about, is quick to install, but probably the most important is once you install this, and what we see is carriers won't go out and deploy 1,000 of these in a city. They'll go out and address their hotspots or their not spots, but as their traffic patterns change, as additional hotspots come on board, that's when our solution allows them to already understand what the RF network looks like, and our algorithms will do what ifs of, okay, if you put one here, here's how the network reconfigures, and here's the types of throughputs that you can expect to get out of that point. So it becomes a real-time planning capability that the carriers can use as they go to deploy and scale their network. Because scalability is the biggest challenge here. We can talk today about a link here, a link there, but looking at the numbers that the carriers need to get to be able to give the user experience to their customers, we're talking significant densification. And to be able to do that, you can't, the traditional RF planning tools that we've been used to with 2G and 3G just aren't going to allow them to cost effectively get to where they need to get to.
Okay, so with that in mind, then, what should we expect to see from BiNQ Networks this year and going into the future in terms of product developments and perhaps anything else that you see that's going to enhance either your product offering or the way that your business actually goes to market?
Well, I think this year is a critical year for us. We've introduced our X100 product, which is our 10 megahertz, 82 megabit solution. We'll be introducing our complete overall backhaul SON capability, which will have been introduced at CTIA. And from there, we'll be introducing our future elements, which will be single band, multi-band, higher bands, 20 megahertz bands, multi-bands up to 40 megahertz, essentially evolving the LTE ecosystem, the baseband ecosystem, and bringing the capability to the small cell backhaul world. And so we see it will be a continuum as we go from 4G to 5G. The requirement to densify the network will be there. The requirement to have a dynamic real-time backhaul network will be critical. And our self-organizing capability we see as a key role in that. And our elements that we bring to market, as well as elements that may be licensed by RAN OEMs or elements that may be integrated into access points, will all be part of it.
Well, thanks for that, Mickey. It sounds as though we've got a lot to look forward to from BLiNQ Networks, even to the extent that you're thinking about 5G already. So that's and your and certainly your comments and observations will be a great contribution to this report on small cell backhaul. Just to remind everyone, this report aims to provide an overview of the different small cell backhaul solutions that are available, and it will have an in-depth interview like this one from all the leading vendors who have participated in the report. The report can be downloaded from the Sense of Hiley website, senseofhealeyconsulting.com. Well, with that, I'd like to say thank you very much again to Mickey Miller, President and CEO of BLiNQ Networks, and I hope everyone's enjoyed the conversation we've had today.